From Leesburg, Virginia, Freemanpedia presents the Illustrative Examples 10th Episode Spectacular, featuring a celebration of the first 10 episodes, special guest stars, and the Moroccan conflict with the Songhai Empire. And now, your host, Ben Freeman!
Thanks, best friend Steve Heimleer. Wow. 10 episodes, and how far we've come. You know, it seems like only a few months ago, there were very few content-specific AP World History Modern videos tied directly to the illustrative examples from the College Board. And now, there are 10. Remember the time I did a costume change? What's the first thing you think about when you think about the Ottoman Empire? Farming. Or the time I almost bought a boat. I should buy a boat. Or the time I made my first video on this camera and didn't realize it had a nicer setting than 480p and it looked like this. Good times. But since today is the hashtag 10th episode spectacular, I figured we'd do something spectacular. We are doing 2 examples in this episode. That's right, we are doing both 3.1 state rivalry example of the Songhai Empire's conflict with Morocco and 4.5's competition over trade routes example of Moroccan conflict with the Songhai Empire. So there's 2, Songhai versus Morocco and Morocco versus Songhai. Why did they put it in there twice? I don't know.
Freeman! Hold up!
Heimler, your intro's over. Stop interrupting the hashtag 10th episode spectacular.
Your whole show is about focusing on one illustrative example and going into detail about that one example, and now just because it's the hashtag 10th episode spectacular, you think you can cheat and do 2?
Look, dude, I don't pop into your channel and critique your hilarious, concise breakdowns of both historical and current events issues in AP World and AP US.
You know, you think after 10 episodes you'd be better at this, Freeman. Let the professional handle it. What if I told you that the conflict between Morocco and the Songhai was so prolific that it's the only one to show up in the College Board CED twice? Today's illustrative example is the Moroccan-Songhai Conflict.
What up? I'm Ben Freeman from Freemanpedia.com.
And I'm Steve Heimler, the bald, bearded proprietor of Heimler's History.
And today's a twofer. This conflict is so prolific, it's in both Units 3 and Unit 4. And yet there isn't much about it on YouTube.
Until today, but it's way too early to be throwing around words like Tondibi and Marrakesh, so let's get some context.
Look, you can't randomly walk up to someone on the street and be like,
the Moroccans allied with the English to take down the Spanish using Songhai gold.
Look, there's a lot going on in that sentence. You gotta put the Moroccans and their conflict with the Songhais into historical context. It's the Star Wars crawl. After the Lucasfilms logo and the long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, you get the Star Wars crawl. They put this in so that you aren't randomly dropped into the action. You have some context as to what's happening. This way, you know what's going on in the Star Wars universe when the hyperdrives start hypering. You need to do this with your essays. Before you kick into lightspeed with all of your historical content, put it into the greater historical context so that it makes sense to someone reading your essays. Okay, here we go. 1 minute on the clock.
Hey, what's the deal with the clock?
Oh, this? Yeah, well, contextualization is a big part of essays, but it shouldn't dominate the whole thing. So I put a clock here to remind people to try to keep it short. And in my videos, I try to keep it under a minute.
And you're able to keep it under a minute each time?
Sure.
So for the Moroccan-Songhai conflict, you'd say something like this, maybe? AP World History's early modern period spans from 1450 to 1715. Today's Moroccan-Songhai conflict falls into both the land-based empires of Unit 3 and the maritime empires of Unit 4. It all centers around control of the trans-Saharan trade route. It's the late 1500s, so European maritime trade has lessened the importance of this route. The Moroccans were wedged between the Spanish Empire to the north and the Ottoman Empire to the east. The Moroccans had recently defeated Portuguese and their treasury was strained, so the Moroccans turned to the powerful, wealthy Songhai Empire and their lucrative access to gold deposits in the south. At the Battle of Tondibi in 1591, the Moroccans crossed the desert and invaded the Songhai Empire. Think of the Moroccan-Songhai rivalry as being similar to the Ottoman-Safavid rivalry, or Muslims and Europeans clashing over trade routes in the Indian Ocean. Boom! Moroccans versus Songhai, perfectly contextualized in under a minute. How long does it normally take you?
How long does it normally take me? Son of a... Today we head to a region we don't normally visit, It's between three major world empires in a spot that's in modern-day Morocco. You have the Spanish and Portuguese empires to the north, and the Ottoman Empire to the east. The last time AP World History was here in Morocco was about 150 years prior to this, with Ibn Battuta in Unit 2. He was from Morocco and started and ended all of his epic adventures here in the city of Tangier. And that's actually a pretty good reference point for today's example. Why? Because Ibn Battuta's final journey took him across the Sahara Desert into the Kingdom of Mali. Here, he saw the impact of the spread of Islam and the wealth that their connection to the trans-Saharan trade route had brought them. But fast forward 150 years after Ibn Battuta, both his homeland in Morocco and the Empire of Mali are now both under new management. Morocco is ruled by the Saadi, or Happiness Sultanate. They ruled Morocco for about 100 years, from 1549 to 1659. And this isn't some Tatooine-style backwater on the outer rim. The Moroccan Sultan had just defeated the Portuguese Empire in 1578, and this finally ended our old friend Prince Henry's family's rule of Portugal. And Morocco had diplomatic ties with the British Empire and was actually allied with Queen Elizabeth I to help take down the Spanish Empire. But this never came to fruition, as both the Queen and the Sultan coincidentally died in 1603.
And the old Mali Empire, weakened under bad leadership and succession disputes, eventually succumbed to the growing Songhai Empire centered in Gao. The Songhai Empire was the largest of the sub-Saharan Islamic African empires and the most profitable. But by the time they clashed with the Moroccans in 1591, the Songhai glory days are behind them.
And that's where the Moroccans come in. Although the Moroccans had just defeated the Portuguese Empire, the cost of doing so had almost bankrupted them. And with big plans to ally with Queen Elizabeth I in England and take down the Spanish Empire, they needed some fast cash.
And unfortunately for the Songhai Empire, they were standing between the Moroccans and the lucrative gold and salt trade from the trans-Saharan trade routes the Songhai controlled.
So the Moroccans boldly sent 4,000 troops across the Sahara Desert. This included 2,500 infantry troops, each carrying one of these bad boys, an arquebus, and 1,500 light cavalry on horses and camels, and the coup de grace, 8 English cannons.
The Songhai are struggling, but they're still the mighty Songhai Empire. They meet the invaders with 40,000 soldiers of their own. You know how your teacher throughout Unit 3 was all like, gunpowder this and gunpowder that. Well, the Songhai had the numbers, but they did not have the gunpowder.
So you can probably guess what happens. The Moroccans quickly took down the Songhai Empire. They even took down the cities that Ibn Battuta had praised 150 years ago, the cities of Gao and Timbuktu, and put the final nail in the coffin of the Songhai Empire.
So the Moroccans were victorious, but it turned out to be a Pyrrhic victory. The disruption from the invasion didn't just put an end to the Songhai Empire, it all but ended the trans-Saharan trade itself, with sub-Saharan African trade now fully focused on trade with Europeans along the coast.
And the Moroccans couldn't maintain their control of the old Songhai Empire from their headquarters all the way across the Sahara Desert. Plus, sometimes history gets in the way, and a second wave of plague hit Morocco in the early 1600s, killing their sultan and any hopes that they may have had of maintaining Morocco.
This conflict between the Songhai Empire and the Moroccan Sultanate earns the title as the only illustrative example to be used twice in the College Board CED. So when you think back to Morocco versus Songhai, think in terms of state rivalries among land-based empires from Unit 3 and economic rivalries over trade routes from Unit 4.
Was that too long? Did you not watch for the 10th time? Alright, let's recap. My best friend, Steve Heimler, jumped in to remind me that what I thought was 2 illustrative examples was actually just 1. Heimler then contextualized in under a minute, which is super easy to do and really isn't a big deal, so let's just shut up about it. We focused on 3.1 and 4.5 and the Moroccan-Songhai rivalry, and more specifically, the Battle of Tondibi in 1591, where it all went down. I broke down the Moroccans from their Ibn Battuta days up to their alliance with Queen Elizabeth. Meanwhile, Heimler traced the Songhai Empire and their eventual demise at the hands of the Moroccans. Okay, thanks again for watching. Once again, I'm Ben Freeman from Freemanpedia.com.
And I'm Steve Heimler from Heimler's History.
So head on over to Heimler's History and give my best friend Steve Heimler a subscribe. Lord knows he needs it. Poor guy. Well, there it is. Can you believe we did 10 episodes? Wow. Well, I think that went well.